Do you find it difficult to live on a day-to-day basis as a human being? Does life just freaking suck and other people blow and whatever other
I thought we were
vacuum
going to talk
cleaner
about dogs.
analogies? Yeah, right? Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're going to be talking about the challenges of being human. This is the Existential Stoic
It ain't easy.
podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Randy?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I mean, this is all based off of the premise, of course, that we are actually human and we're not just some AI.
Or in a Matrix or something, and just like a brain in a yeah. I mean, yeah. But whatever,
Hmm.
we'll go with that because that's our experience.
Right. So there's a lot of challenges coming with being human. And this idea kind of came because like there was I forget what it's called, like a tautology or a truism or something like that, where like,
Pathology.
yeah, where like I get down on myself when I make mistakes. Now I'm probably the only person who does that. Everybody else is just
Nobody
going
else
cool.
does.
But
No
yeah,
one.
nobody else
Yeah.
does it. Yeah. But like I get down on myself when I make mistakes. And so I heard this tautology one day that's like humans make mistakes. I'm a human.
They
Therefore,
are.
I will make mistakes.
Yeah.
And like that, just hearing that like lifted a whole bunch of pressure off of my shoulders. But I figured in that same vein, we could go over some of the challenges of being human because it's oftentimes like we get really frustrated with life or really depressed or really whatever because we're experiencing something as humans that we think we shouldn't have to.
You know what's funny? It's like one of the things like one of the reasons I'm happy I studied philosophy, and it's like sad that I always feel sad that more people don't read, like don't have to study it, but don't read it, you know? Because like one thing it did teach me and I found fascinating was like people have always struggled pretty much with the same set of mental problems and and issues with living their lives, right? About what is good, what really has value, how do I decide things, how do I be a good person? These things have been just bothering us forever. Like, what's success look like? What is happiness? How do I get it? And I think it's interesting because when you look at, you can go back to like ancient philosophy, contemporary, and you'll see the same questions again and again. And at least, granted, they might not always have the answers you want, but it at least shows you that, you're definitely not alone in this. This has been an ongoing issue. We've always been trying to, understand our place in the world, understand what this means, find, the best way to live because we have this, as far as we know, we have one chance, right? And we want to make it the best we can,
Mhm.
and it's, it takes a lot of work. It's difficult. And the other thing I liked
Yeah.
about too, one other thing was like, I do like that all the philosophers do, none of them say like there's a quick fix. Because it's all for all of them, it's lifelong process, and they might
That's only
never
the
get
modern
there.
gurus that have a
Yeah,
quick fix.
I know the
And
seven
it
minute
comes with a
solution.
price tag. Yeah.
Oh God, I know I get so tired of that.
Mhm.
And it's always shorter. They started out with like 7 weeks. Now it's like 2 minutes. Just do
Yeah,
this
right?
thing.
Just do this one breathing meditation technique and you'll be enlightened and happy forever. But also an interesting thing is that, you can kind of have it figured out for a little while, but
Yeah.
then when you most need whatever you figured out, it's not even there. It's
We
gone. It disappears.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. It's like, it's like you have all these tools in your backpack, but when you need it, you forget it every
Hmm.
freaking time. I know, I think about that a lot because like every time I have like have like a moment of like depression, anxiety, or something like I should know how to deal with this, but yet I just in the moment, it's like it's all just your brain just like it just pushes everything outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really weird.
Yeah, it's like you know, well, I think it was Epictetus who said it, who
Epictetus,
Epictetus,
they're hard to say.
who
I know
yeah, who it's not what happens to you in life, is your interpretation of it. And like, granted, logically, know that. As soon as bad stuff's happening in my life, logic goes right out the window
yeah.
because it's the terrible things happening to me in my life, not my interpretation of them.
Well, I think this is what's interesting, right? This is what a lot of these guys realized really early on thinking about that stuff was like, I think that's kind of our problem is that we're not just rational beings, right? We have emotions, we have lots of other things going on, and our emotions are insanely powerful in
Mhm.
comparison. Like
Yeah.
reason's great, don't get me wrong, and like we can come up with justifications for things, it's pretty strong, but emotions really do trump it. And I think that's why, you see like especially like the ancients talked about like, with the virtue, like practice, repetition, because it helps you kind of recognize things, be aware of it, and then make the right decision or do the right thing at the time that you need it. But it takes a lot of work. It's not instant. And it always blows my mind how strong emotions are. Like
Hmm.
every time, like at the end of the day, when I start to get like depressed, down on myself, like I'm a failure, and then I realize I'm just tired and grumpy. And it's like, but it
Yeah.
surprises me every time how real that feeling is.
Hmm.
At that moment, it seems
Yep.
like that is true. It's really weird.
Yep. I know. I get there all the time too, and I'm just like, ah, it's late. I need to go to sleep.
Yeah, I've been telling myself that now. I'm just like, I probably need to sleep. I'll assess this in the morning, and then I wake up in the morning, I'm like, I feel fine.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
so that is another challenge of being human. How there's no like happily ever after. There's no once and done. It's like, we're hungry and then we eat, but it doesn't last forever. It only lasts for a few hours and then we're hungry again. Or like we're thirsty and we fix that and then we're thirsty again. And we're like breathing. All these things that we do, it's never done. It's just, time.
That's, I think, one of the worst lies we tell ourselves, especially to young people, like kids and stuff. All those movies, all those books you read about the
Fairy
happily ever after.
tales.
Yeah, all the happily ever. Well, the old fairy tales, they weren't happily ever after. They were horrible. And
Yeah,
in
the
some sense,
children
that
get
might have
eaten
been
by some
better.
witch in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all
Uh-huh.
the happily ever after stuff, though, it makes it seem like there is a clear causal relationship between actions and consequence. And once you hit this thing, you're good. That's it. You're happy from now on. And what it doesn't tell you is that it requires continuous effort and work to
Yeah.
maintain. And I think it is because I think we all suffer from that, right? Like, all I
They
gotta
need they
do
need
is
to
get this.
update. Yeah, they need to update Cinderella. How it's like, that he finds the glass slipper, puts it on her thing or on her foot, and then happily ever after. It should be like finds it, puts it on her foot, they get married 3 years later, they hate each other, get divorced. That would be more realistic.
Or just like they have arguments, they have to work through things, they're seeing a marriage counselor.
Uh-huh. Yep.
It's a 7 hour version.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a challenging thing being human. But also, so like here's another thing is like all the things that you experience as a human, you may think that you're the only person who experiences it, or you may think that it's the worst for you, or can't get any better. You're the one that doesn't, but every experience has been experienced by other people, and
Well,
there's
and
nothing unique to you. And
that's
yeah,
the hard part though, right? Because from your
but I'm a
perspective, it is.
beautiful snowflake.
Yeah. But from your perspective, it is, right? Like your
Yeah.
problem's going to be the worst thing
Yeah.
comparatively. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like it is helpful to remind yourself that other people have gone through this because it makes you feel less alone. And also it means that, it's not this thing that's insurmountable. There are solutions, right? I think the other thing too is, and I think this is something I've been trying to work on more, but like not taking ourselves so seriously all the time is
Mm.
important. I think it really does help, like both laughing at yourself, but also just realizing that your shit's just not that important. And maybe you can step back from it because it's so easy, especially nowadays, with like the way that people work, the, pressure put on everyone, the stress. It's so easy to feel like the stuff I have to do is like it's the end of the world if it doesn't get done. But the reality is it's really not. And eventually you're going to die and the world's going to move on without you there doing all these things. So like it's going to be just fine. So I think from that perspective, it's important if we take ourselves a little less seriously, it can also help us to, I think, deal with these moments of peril, sort of a little bit, being a little bit easier on ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There was, let's see, my civic obligation to vote, and it was one of these people who takes politics exceptionally seriously, like
Yeah.
extremely seriously, and it's probably the most important thing in their life. But it got into a heated argument because I was like, listen, what's in my control? Not any politics stuff, and I'm not even convinced that voting makes a difference. And so, uh,
Also,
so I was
point
like,
back, if it's a right to vote, it means you have a choice to vote.
right,
It doesn't mean
yeah.
it's required.
Yeah, but that's besides the point. And I was like, I try and focus on stuff that's in my control. And if I actually thought that my vote made a difference, I would go ahead and vote. But I think of the fact it doesn't make a difference, so I didn't go ahead and do that. And anyways, I got into a heated argument. And then I reminded myself towards the end, I was like, hey, well, it doesn't really matter because he's going to believe what he believes. I'm going to believe what I believe. So in the end, I was just like, you know what, you're right. I was I totally see what you're saying now. You're completely right in all your views, and he softened and everything. And then I'm like, in the end, we're all going to die anyways, and it really, whatever
Doesn't matter.
election 2024 doesn't matter.
Nope.
But it's crazy how this time of year the people come out of the woodwork who like elections are the most
Yeah.
and politics is like the most important thing ever.
Well, it's funny because they put so much. Yeah, it's like they put so much of themselves in this. It's like, it's like when somebody goes through like a game and like, whether the team wins or loses will determine like their mood till the next
Yeah.
game,
Yeah, it's
right?
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
like that weird group think and like and I get it. It can be fun. Like it can definitely be fun and it can be engaging when you let yourself kind of fully embrace something like that. But it can also be really detrimental and problematic too, especially for like you said, like we don't have control over it. Yes, you can vote. That's the thing you can do. That is the thing you can do. Beyond that, really there's not much else. Unless, I mean, you can I guess spend a lot of time like trying to do stuff and whatever for it. But yeah, it is funny though, because but at the same time I know I hate those kind of arguments because the other person just wants you to validate that they're right. That's all they really want.
It's one of those things where like the first thing they said was, "So what do you think is going to happen with the election?" And in my back of my mind, I'm like, "Oh no, here we go."
Yeah, it's always the case.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
who care less.
And it's funny, the
Anyway,
next election will be the most important election ever. And then the next one.
always, always,
Yeah.
because that's yeah. So, what other things suck about being human? You know what really sucks about being human?
What's that?
My biggest challenge right now is that there is a limit on how quickly I can learn and get things done.
Yeah, it does suck, doesn't it?
Sucks big time. Like I remember Elon Musk was talking about how like one of the big problems with phones is that you can have all this data coming to you, but like actually inputting data is somewhat slower by either texting or voice or whatever, but it's still slow. So that
It's
was
limited
part
by
of
the
his
speed at which we can do things. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so that was part of his idea for Neuralink because that would enable you to input stuff a lot faster.
And then they
And I
could
was like,
just
man,
inject
if
the ads right to your brain.
yeah, and then I was like, man, if they had that for learning where you could just like boom, download it. Because I was thinking about that's like there's like an input into your brain where it can only be like what you can read and what you can learn and what you can do in a day, but that's there's a limit to that. And if
Oh,
you could
dude.
take those limits off, you could be limitless.
I mean, people probably, yeah, like the movie. The
Yeah,
Matrix is a good example of this, but when he hooks in and like
yeah.
learned that is such a cool scene because like that would be incredible if you could just be
Now
like,
I
all
know
right,
Kung Fu.
yeah, I know Kung Fu. He's great. I'll tell you about something else later, but it's not relevant
Whoa.
now.
Yeah.
I like Keanu Reeves a lot. He's great.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
yeah, it would be awesome. But we are limited by stuff. And I think that's the other thing is realizing we have limitations. Like most things, like really big things, they extend beyond one generation. They take many, I mean, if you think about it, I always think of this too, like the human project, I guess if you want to call it that, is like ongoing. We're
Hmm.
constantly adding to knowledge. We're constantly adding to progress, technologies, things that we're creating, ideas, all kinds of areas. And so it's ongoing. Nothing's fixed, settled, definite, right?
That's a great point. Like one thing that I do every once in a while is I just kind of like de wonder at the infrastructure that's already built. Like the
Yeah.
house that I live in and the power coming to this house and the water coming to this house. And you flush the toilet and all this stuff disappears and the trash you just put it outside and it's taken care of. Like just
150
wonder and
years ago, they were
amazement
just
and
throwing it
marvel.
out the window.
Yeah, but it's like all this stuff that I did not have to concern myself with. It's just taken care of.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Crazy.
But I think that's the other difficulty of being human. Thank you for reminding me. Is,
Hmm.
you know, we have this tendency to very quickly take for granted what's
Mm.
already present. And we,
Mhm.
we're very quick to just assume what's normal. And I get it because it is I'm sure that probably comes from some evolutionary thing, right? Of like security, what's familiar versus what's not familiar, that kind of thing. But we have this weird tendency where we take things for granted very quickly. And I think you have to be aware of that because like, important things like relationships, like your happiness with work, your choices, like those can all suffer if you take them for granted because it means you won't make changes that are good for you. They're going to help you move forward, help you advance, help you live a better life.
Hmm. That's a very good point. And there's like so some of the cognitive distortions that we sometimes talk about, there's focusing on the negative, but there's also discounting the positive. So
Yeah.
like and one of the ways, so like discounting a positive is all the good stuff in your life, it doesn't count. So like, you have someone take your trash away. Oh, it doesn't count. It's like a municipal thing. It's not, it's taken,
Everybody
you
gets
have
that. That doesn't count.
everybody gets that. Yeah. You have a fully functioning car that gets you where you need to. Oh, that doesn't count because everybody has a car.
Clean
I
drinking
don't have a
water.
Lamborghini.
You
Yeah,
don't have
clean
to
drinking,
walk a
all this
mile to
stuff.
go get it, right?
Yeah. And so like discounting the positive. So one of the ways uh to combat that is to actually list the positive. So like count your blessings,
That's a
essentially.
good one. That's kind of like the
Yeah.
small delights thing too, right? Like I think this is
Hmm.
important that people, I wish it is funny. Like I wish we got taught this stuff in school. We have this education system that doesn't teach us anything about living life, which cracks me up.
But I
Like,
read the Scarlet Letter.
yeah, like it's like instead of like, I don't know how to live and be happy and like a well-rounded and
Yeah.
person, whatever. But yeah, it is funny. Like I wish they kind of taught that like when we were younger, that like, there's lots of good things, but if you don't keep actively recognizing them, you will easily just ignore them. And then you
Hmm.
forget and quickly imagine yourself way worse off than you actually are, and you imagine your situation way worse off. I see this all the time. Like, it's like, well, it's like, when we transitioning jobs, right? I talk to so many people that are so unhappy in what they do, but so afraid to take that step. And part of it because it's, even though they're unhappy, they're familiar with their unhappy, crappy situation and they're
Hmm.
scared of changing it. It's like if you focus on what you did have and realize that you can make those changes, you would, and you'd be better off. And I feel like sometimes we almost want, I don't know. I don't want to get into like the whole thing, but yeah,
And like not only that, but like all the stuff that we currently have was at some point stuff that we really, really wanted for the
yeah,
most part.
yeah,
Like even that crummy job that you hate, you did have to go to an interview for it probably.
yeah. You're
And
probably
at
excited
one
when you
point
got it.
it was
Yeah,
yeah, at one point it was exciting. So yeah, it's just crazy how it's a it's terrible being a human.
it is hard,
It
isn't
is
it?
well, it's like that stinking quote by whoever. I'd rather be a human dissatisfied than a pig satisfied.
No,
And I
yeah.
think that's wrong.
I'd rather be a pig status. I'd roll in the mud,
Yeah.
hanging out. Yeah,
Unless you're living it like a bacon factory, that might not be the best.
that'd
But
be
even
tough.
then, as long as you don't know what's
Or in
coming,
the
it's
truck
fine.
going to the bacon factory.
Yeah,
Oh God,
right?
when I was in Hatfield, I used to see them all the time. These trucks with the pigs, and I was like,
Oh,
"Oh,
yeah.
fellas,
Yeah, right?
you're gonna be tasty
Yeah.
soon." Yeah,
Hmm.
it is. It's interesting. But I think that's also I like this point about dissatisfaction because it is also a means by which we recognize how to change our lives, right, and make them better. But
Hmm.
you also have the dissatisfaction. It just can't be dissatisfaction. It also has to be dissatisfaction with action. It has to be dissatisfaction that motivates planning and decision making that's going to then solve those problems that you see. And great, we can't solve everything. Like some of them are way beyond our realm of like, yes, I would love a world that had like better social relations and stuff. But like, okay, that's kind of beyond me. But things in my life I can change, right? There's lots of things I can do to make it better. And I think that is a healthy way to look at it, you
That
know.
is a great point,
But
taking
it is hard.
responsibility for your life. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
But
another hard thing, right? You have to take responsibility for yourself. That
yeah,
sucks.
you don't have to, but it's
Yeah.
probably a good idea to do it.
Well,
Yeah.
whether you
So
do or not, you do have it.
yeah, I'm sure we could go on for hours talking about
Yeah.
the challenges of being human because literally everywhere you look, there's another
There's a
challenge. But
challenge.
we'll end it there. Keep it nice and short. If you enjoyed this episode, we have hundreds, literally hundreds more episodes on YouTube, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Until next time, this is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Andy.